Well, good morning, everybody. Thanks very much for coming to our webinar today on Tales of Lean ERP and Customer Stories. My name is Mike Hull, and I'll be your host, and we'll get started right on time here. One thing I wanted to ask everybody to do, and this is, I believe everybody is on mute, so if you do have questions, we have close to 40 people registered for the event. So if you do have questions, if you want to send them through to my email address once we get started, what I'll do is I'll interrupt John periodically and ask him those questions. All right, so today we have from eBECS, John Conwell is a senior consultant and on the operations side, and John will be giving the bulk of our presentation and our demo. James Gilmer is here with us, and he's on our marketing team. And I'm Mike Hull. I'm General Manager of eBECS for North America. My contact information is down there, so like I mentioned, if you have a question that you would like John to answer as we're going on, please send that through to my email, and then what I'll be doing is once John takes over, I'll get onto my email and just kind of look at that and make sure we don't miss anything. One other piece of housekeeping here is that I know a lot of you have very busy days, and so just to let you know at the very end, the last thing I'll be telling everybody is that we will follow up with everybody that's either registered or attends the webinar, and what we'll be talking about is lean manufacturing process support inside of Dynamics AX. And so we'll follow up just to see if that's of interest to you, and if that is of interest and that's of some value, the next step to be done after that would be to have a conference called Discovery Meeting, where we would get together with your lean team and talk specifically about what kind of transformation you have, what kind of processes are now in place on the manufacturing floor. And after we go through that, if there's still interest, we would arrange a one-to-one demonstration where we would speak specifically to your issues. So the agenda for today, a very short AX and eBECS overview. And then we'll be doing a lean manufacturing for Dynamics AX demonstration. So we'll move pretty quickly through a lot of slides, but we'll try to spend a lot of time inside the software. So let's talk about lean ERP just for a second. First thing is we need to talk a little bit about, in the context of talking about lean ERP, it's a concept of a mixed model, and that is just about all of our customers are not purely lean process companies. Their manufacturing consists of some items that are still on a push basis, run by MRP thinking, and then some degree of processes that are now on a pull basis and really kind of controlled by lean thinking. So what we are really good at eBECS is being able to mix those together and then help walk you through the changes as you go on through the years with the Dynamics AX system. So in essence, lean ERP consists of two components. I call them special sauce. First is that the product itself has native lean process support capabilities. So there, as John often calls it, there's a tool set. Not every tool applies to every person that's using it, but the tool set's there to be selected from. And so we can support a variety of different Kanban strategies, if you will, planning systems, scheduling systems. So John will show us a little bit about that as we go on, but the product itself has true native support for this. We're not trying to fool it. It's actually built into the product. The second is that we bring a lean thinking implementation team with us. So as you're listening to John today, he's one of our senior consultants. When John comes on site, he really does sit down with the lean team, and he really does get a good understanding as to what transformation's taking place, where you're going, what your issues and objectives are, maybe some of the things you're doing Kaizen events on currently, so that we can get a good idea as to how to set AX up to support both the existing processes and then your migration in the future to maybe other processes. A couple things. We only add software where software adds value, so we do not get in the way of visual environments. We do our utmost best not to do that. And then, as I mentioned before, we build a mixed model that can change as you transform. So the software will never put you in a box. You'll never be saying, oh, gee whiz, we think that the best thing for our business is to deploy our processes this way. We can't do that because the software won't let us. That is absolutely not the case with us, and that's a big part of the special sauce that we bring to the whole thing. And then lastly, will never take you backwards in your lean journey. I mean, if you go to AME, go to Lean Accounting Summit, places like that, big concern is that ERP vendors would take customers backwards in what they've spent 3 to 5 years trying to achieve. And we absolutely will not do that. In fact, we'll help you move forward. So that's our concept of Lean ERP. So as John goes through and shows you some of the processes, tells you some of the customer stories, this is the perspective to kind of keep all that in. So let me make a couple of comments about Dynamics AX, because we do have a lot of AX customers in the webinar today, but there are also a lot of people that are not using AX and maybe considering using AX. Essentially, Dynamics AX is a very competent enterprise ERP solution. It's used both globally and locally. So some of our customers have a single plant someplace, and then some of them are in many countries around the world. eBECS is currently involved in the largest AX rollout in the world today, and that will eventually have over 20,000 users. It'll be in, I believe, 40 different countries, and they'll be migrating somewhere around 20 some odd different ERP solutions all onto AX. So it's a very robust system. I bring this very busy picture up just to show you that it speaks, the product itself, the application, the solution, speaks to the main areas that are commonly assumed to be inside of an ERP solution. Gartner validates that. Gartner is a research agency that does a lot of different types of research, but one of the things that they do is every year they come out with a mid-market ERP analysis. So what companies are offering a solution, and then they put them on this quadrant here, and you have the ability to execute running up and down and back and forth, this completeness of vision. And the key thing I want to show you there is that Dynamics AX is in the leader quadrant in terms of the ability to execute in the completeness of their vision. And you can see there that one of the household names is SAP, but we're right there with SAP in terms of competence of the actual application itself. So I wanted to point that out to you because that really does affirm Microsoft's vision for the thing. A couple of facts: over 16,000 implementations worldwide. We've got customers that have just a couple of users to, like I mentioned, thousands of users. Microsoft should bring the concept of long-term stability to your mind. As you look out in the news, you find that ERP applications or solutions are getting swallowed up daily. A lot of times that is just so that a larger company can buy the installed base. Sometimes there's a strategy to eventually migrate those customers to a different platform. What Microsoft should mean to you is that it's going to be here to stay. You buy this system, invest in deploying it, and get your whole company up and running on it. It doesn't need to change for a very, very long time. It's multilingual, multi-currency, multi-country, so it's a true enterprise global system. It's across many vertical markets. We're going to be speaking today pretty much to manufacturing, but retail, project-based manufacturing, project-based companies. There's many, many vertical markets that it speaks to outside of manufacturing and distribution. And the whole concept Microsoft's tried to build into it is for it to be adaptable, agile, and responsive. So as your business changes, your business needs and processes change, reporting needs, its analysis needs change, but the application never holds you back. It helps you move forward. And then today, and our perspective with AX, one last comment, is that we're going to be talking about lean manufacturing. So naturally, the product supports traditional manufacturing. In fact, probably most of the customers that are using the product are traditional manufacturing models. Inside the lean manufacturing, though, there's a very robust collection of processes that it supports. What John's going to be showing us today is just a couple of them. So when I talked before about doing a one-to-one discovery meeting with you over the phone with your lean team, and then doing a one-to-one demo if you'd like to go forward with that, we will assemble the components that apply to you. But just know that just a couple of things on this chart are what John's going to be demoing today. Now let's take a look at eBECS just for a couple seconds. We're experts in manufacturing and distribution, also projects inside of AX. We're one of the larger AX practices. 200 people probably doesn't sound large to you in terms of a consulting practice, but in the Dynamics AX world, that is a very, very healthy practice. So we're in North America, England, and the Middle East. We are the creator of the lean modules for AX. Essentially, AX was created as a product that a vendor like ourselves could build out a functional area in, sell that into that market, get really good at that, and pretty much create a business around that. But what Microsoft's done over time is to come up, tap you on the shoulder, and say, hey, we'd like to acquire that from you. So we were the creator of the lean modules. Microsoft saw that they were gaining some really good traction, and so they acquired those from us, made them part of the native product. So we kind of go back to the beginning in terms of lean support in AX. Some of our subspecialties, just because of where we've gone with the whole lean motif, is that automotive and medical are big concentration of ours, and we're looked at as the lean thought leader inside the AX community. So that's a little bit about eBECS. Customers, as I mentioned, medical devices, automotive, and then general discrete manufacturing. We've gotten quite a bit of traction in all those areas. These are all customers that are substantially lean thinking, and we've deployed AX inside of. Last but not least is that as time has gone on, eBECS is we have our own development house internally. These people are our employees. It's a low-cost development center that we've developed in Jordan, and we just continue to add support for the product. So these are some lean processes that we've created for the most recent AX 2012 version of the product, and we saw that our customers were pulling us towards supporting processes that the product, our solution, did not support natively, and so basically we created that support, and we'll just continue to do that. So it's just part of being kind of out in front, in the lean thinking world. So that tells you a little bit about eBECS, and what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to change the presenter, and I'm going to hand it over to John Conwell. Like I mentioned to you before, John is a senior consultant of ours, just absolutely a key member of our team. And John will be taking us through what he does every day and talking to customers about their lean journey, about what transformations happened, and then how AX can support that. So John, I'm going to pass it over to you, but one more time, let me remind you, as John goes on, if you have questions, what I'll be doing is looking at my email. So if you have questions, mhull@ebecs.com, and I'll try to interject those into John's presentation. John, I'll pass it over to you now.
Thanks, Mike. Are you able to see my screen, Mike?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Well, good morning, everyone. As Mike said, I'm John Conwell with eBECS, and I'm going to cover a little bit of the lean functionality this morning. So one of the places that we always start to talk about is why would we go to lean software? And there's quite a few reasons. Transparency throughout the entire organization. When we have this lean infrastructure within our system, it becomes transparent to everyone in the organization. It's part of our everyday processes in the system. We're able to, secondly, able to do Kanban calculations straight from customer demand or forecasted demand, and automatic integration with Kanban levels. So often in customers that we work with, they don't reset their Kanban levels as things change, and there's tools directly within AX to help you manage that better. We'll talk about that briefly in a bit. Kanban portals allow you to seamlessly communicate Kanban requirements with potentially your vendors. That's a nice tool. Visibility of critical inventory situations. If you're lean, your Kanbans, you're transacting in the system, you're able to see where you're at in your inventory, so that's quite helpful. Pull directly from the source of demand. So I'm going to show you an example in a little while where we're going to enter a sales order, and it's going to create pull in the system and trigger a Kanban, electronic Kanban in the system to tell us to build something. KPIs and management reports. Obviously, if you're transacting, have transactions in a system, you can get data back out of it, so you can, in real time, give KPIs to people that need to analyze the business. bullwhip management, so we're pulling things through the entire supply chain. We can link all the way to the suppliers where needed. And kind of back to the KPI functionality, the historical data will be in the system, so we can use that to calculate Kanban sizes, do analysis of our runners and repeaters if we want to change strategy on one of our items. Next thing, MRP integration. So in places where we do need to use MRP, obviously in Lean, a lot of places we may not need to use that on our runners and repeater type items, but in places where we do need MRP, it is integrated and can work together. And then we have visibility into our resource requirements, and I'll show you some of that here in a minute with using drumbeat and tack time. This graphic is showing you a real-time display in one of our customers that makes gauges, and they can actually see this real-time throughout the day, so they always know where they're at during the day. Are they up to the tack or not? Are they producing fast enough? So really a nice real-time display that the customer developed. Many of our customers have quite a few pains and challenges. Production planner in Lean master scheduling, they may have Kanban in one area, they may have production orders in another. With those different strategies, sometimes it gets complicated to manage those two different things going on at the same time. And what we're going to show you today is some tools that will help you manage the Kanban, the Kanban items, and the production order type methodologies together. A water spider pain and challenge, he doesn't have visibility of materials that he needs at a work cell. So we'll show you some of that as well. The shop floor cell supervisor, the same problem that the production planner had. He has different methodologies for producing different types of parts. It's confusing to the workers, it's confusing to the supervisors, and I think we're going to show you a way that it's a common infrastructure that everyone's going to use. The machine operator, the same thing again, different user interfaces for different replenishment strategies, maybe a Kanban card for one and a production order paperwork for another. So, you know, we're not doing a standard process for everything that we produce. And then another thing is the barcode support is a nice tool that's built into the Lean in AX 2012. Again, Mike showed this graphic earlier, just showing a lot of the different features and functionalities that are available within Lean, within Dynamics AX 2012, and we're going to show some small percentage of those today. The 5 Lean principles that Womack and Jones put in their book, we really feel that the solution supports those quite nicely, and you'll get to see that here in a moment. Many of our customers that we work with are working in a mixed mode of planning and execution. And what I mean by that is like we've said a minute ago, they're using Kanban in one area for their runner and repeater items. They're using production orders for their stranger kind of items. And so AX really did a great job of putting all that together in the Lean infrastructure in 2012. We'll talk a little bit about something called Sales Event Kanban. We'll talk about Fixed Kanban. And we'll talk about how those different strategies work together to support everything from the sales order driving us to make something, MRP where it makes sense to use that for items that have to be purchased specifically to order, and then using production orders and Kanban together, and then where we use purchase order and supplier Kanban, we can support that as well. Something that's really important to understand going into the discussion we're about to have is really what is Lean in AX 2012? What is it trying to do? And there's two key pieces that Lean in 2012 does. We can produce something using a production Kanban, or we can transfer or withdraw, move material using a withdrawal Kanban. And if you look at the replenishment strategies and you start kind of from left to right, you start at the left side and you're talking about fixed quantity, which would be more of a make-to-stock situation. Many companies I work with will use Kanban cards, or they'll use empty bins to trigger replenishment. That's more of the fixed quantity Kanban, and we'll talk about that in a few moments. as we start going to the right of this graphic, we start working our way towards more of a make-to-order world. And in that situation, there's tools within Lean. We won't cover all of them today, but there's a minimum on hand way to trigger replenishment based on minimum on hand. It'll create a Kanban. There's a schedule Kanban, which is more of an MRP-based Kanban. It creates a plan Kanban that can be firmed. And then you start working over towards even more of the make-to-order world, where a sales event or entering a sales order itself triggers manufacture. And you'll see, we'll kind of talk about some of our customers that we worked with where they've used these different strategies, and we'll get into that in a moment. Production bomb line event, we won't cover that today, but that's basically where a production order could actually generate a Kanban to pull material to a production order if you did choose to use production orders. Many of our customers don't even use production orders when they implement Lean 2012. And then the last one is a Kanban line, and that'll be used in our example today for a make-to-order part. So this graphic is basically showing that within one model we can use quite a few different techniques within the same model. And this is basically was built off our electric motor company that I'm going to talk to you about in just a minute. Some of the different strategies that they used within their model. Sales event Kanban, we've talked about, where I enter a sales order, it tells me to build something. Kanban line event, where I have a make-to-order component. Fixed Kanban, where I use a traditional two-bin or card system. I can use what's called a fixed Kanban and AX 2012 to model that. And then there is some add-on functionality that eBECS offers to create purchase Kanban, and that's something that some of our customers are using as well, to be able to interact with the vendor, to be able to scan a Kanban empty and have the vendor immediately see visibility of that and know that they need to replenish that item. Another thing on this model is the CTP, and CTP stands for Capable to Promise, and that is a fairly widely used industry term, meaning that I want to see if I'm capable of producing this in the time that the customer has requested. So it'll look at material availability and, more importantly, in some cases, capacity. We'll talk about that briefly here in a minute. One of the challenges that so many of our customers have, or they are make to order and they want to be lean. So Greg Lane has written this book, Make to Order Lean, and I suggest that you read it. It really does some great things. Talks about where MRP fits, how to manage your runners and repeaters. It really does some really helpful things to understand how this world of make to order and make to stock and all of it can fit together. So, kind of to go back into one of our customers, it's the electronic motor manufacturer. The highlighted blue section at the top are the things that we're going to cover today. So there's quite a few. You can see there's just a lot of functionality that this electronic motor manufacturer used. Sales event Kanban to tell them to make finished goods. Kanban line event for the make-to-order components. They're using schedule boards to see their capacity and see if they've got a constrained situation. And then they're using process boards to report production. They're using the pegging tree to see the status of orders. And basically what that is, that gives you the ability from a sales order to see where you're at. So another customer of ours, a lightweight armor manufacturer, they're using some similar functionality to the motor manufacturer, the sales events, Kanban line events, and we'll kind of talk about those in a moment. The schedule Kanban we won't cover today, but if that was something that fit for your business, obviously it'd be another tool in the toolbox that you could use to solve some of those issues. So let's go on into the demo. Again, we're going to talk about fixed Kanbans. We're going to talk about a make-to-order process, what Kanban boards are and what they do. We'll talk a little bit about Kanban transfers, which is where we're pulling materials from one place to another within our facility or across sites. We'll talk a little bit about production flows and what they do. And transfer Kanbans, we'll talk about those as well. And we'll talk just briefly about the CTP, Capable to Promise, and also Kanban calculations, where we can look at transactional history or future history in the system to see what how many Kanbans we really should have. This is the bill of material that we're going to use for our demo today. Basically, I've created a really simple bill of material to represent different types of items that you might have in some of your manufacturing facilities. The top level item is a DMTO finished good, and it consists of a make-to-order DMTO COMP, a make-to-order component, and then underneath that is a raw material that we actually need to pull specifically to order, and it's not stored line side. So maybe it's an item that's in a warehouse and it's a stranger component, and when we need it, we just want to trigger a signal to tell the water spider material handler they need to pull that particular item, transfer it to the floor. And then the last the last component is DFix KB component, which is a fixed Kanban control component. So that would be something that you would use like with Kanban cards today, or maybe a multiple bin system for replenishment. And I'll show you how you would do that within AX using the fixed Kanban strategy. And then underneath that item is just a raw material that is backflushed. So it would just be backflushed as we produce this part. So we'll go through the process to pull material, then we'll go through the process to make the component, and then we'll go through the process to make the top level, and we'll talk through each one of those. So we'll start out with the fixed Kanban process, and you'll see I have a graphic down there with the tent. This is something that our tent manufacturer, who's going live at the end of this summer, is planning on using the fixed Kanban strategy to manage their line-side supermarkets. And they'll use this for runner and repeater items, which will be replenished from a main warehouse when the Kanbans are empty. So we'll go into AX and we'll talk a little bit about that strategy. Now, it's important in AX to understand the different boards that are used. So we'll talk about those different boards real quick. It's really, the nice thing about it is it's really simple. There's only 3 main boards that are used, unless you use a purchase Kanban technique, then there'll be a 4th board. So a scheduler would look at the schedule board. A person on the shop floor would look at the Kanban board for process jobs. And then someone who needs to transfer materials from one place to another will look at the Kanban board for transfer jobs. So let's kind of start at the top. We'll start at the schedule board. Now this particular board is basically what it's showing you is that there's a fixed Kanban component that's managed within this cell. If we had quite a few more Kanban controlled items, they would all show up here. The thing that you'll notice up at the top here is this is work cell D machine. So this would represent one of the work cells in your facility, and you would see all the work that's scheduled for that particular work cell would show up on the board. This can be done in daily buckets, weekly buckets, or monthly buckets. And what you'll see here is that this graphic is showing you for this particular day, and I will warn you that that is an English date format. That can be any date format that we want it to be. We can have it, be in the regular date format as well. But some of my coworkers are across the pond, and they use that date format, so we go ahead and use that as well quite often. So what you're seeing here is you're seeing scheduled for this Thursday that we have 50 pieces scheduled and we have 100 capacity. And this allows us to see where we're at in the schedule, and if we automatically schedule our Kanbans, they'll just drop in the first date that's available. If we want to manually schedule them, then we would basically grab them from here and drag them in a day that was available. So that's kind of we can let this thing automatically schedule, or we can let it manual schedule. And our gauge manufacturer, what they do is they use the make-to-order parts automatically drop into their schedule, and then their make-to-stock parts they drag into the schedule so that they can level their load. So this screen works really well to help them do that. There's some warnings on these that can go off if an item gets below a certain level, it'll actually turn red if you don't have enough of them. So basically what happens in the fixed Kanban strategy is it tells you to build it. It shows up on the schedule board. Once it's scheduled, then it'll show up on the Kanban board for process jobs. So we'll go to that same work cell. We'll change to that D-cut work cell. And that'll show us that we need to build 25 of this particular part. So that's basically a trigger telling the work cell that they need to build this part. And one of the nice features is they can go in and look at the picking list, so they can check this tab and it shows that they have the material available, which is really quite handy. So let's kind of jump back to this graphic for a minute. So kind of the cycle of the fixed Kanban process is that the fixed Kanbans are created, they're scheduled either manually or automatically, and I kind of talked through both of those. Automatic would just drop on the board, manual is where I would drag it onto the schedule board. And then we produce on the Kanban board for process jobs. And the Kanban board for process jobs would be the board that would be in the cell that your workers would actually interact with to report what they've built and how many they've built, and it would actually consume the materials at that point. Pre-flush the materials at the beginning of the process if they wanted to do it that way, or back-flush the materials at the end of the process if they want to do it that way. So then what happens is everybody's made the parts, they go into inventory, they're sitting there available, and then somebody goes and actually pulls some from the bin. Then at that point in time they'll actually scan the Kanban card empty, and I haven't printed one, but I'll show you here in a minute how that can automatically print. That card can be attached. I can print it from here, or it can automatically print when I create a Kanban. That card could be attached to the bin so that it could be scanned when it's empty, and then that would just automatically trigger this process to start all over again. The beauty of this is that your production control people don't even have to be involved in fixed Kanban scenario. A lot of companies I go in, they have production orders, and they have a card and they turn it into production control. Production control has to create a production order, then it has to get transacted, and they have to schedule it, and so there's a lot of steps involved that this really eliminates. When this is set up, they simply scan it empty, it tells somebody to make more. When that somebody makes it, they report they did it, it consumes the material, and then they're done. So there's no production control or scheduling involvement if you set it to automatic. If you want it manually scheduled, then you just set the Kanban rule, we'll show you that in a minute, to manual, and then it'll manually be scheduled on the board like we said a minute ago. So in the process, I'm the person on the floor. I need to make 25 of this particular part. I actually can see production instructions. If I wanted to see production instructions, I can have those attached to the item. And my picking list says I have the material. I have a couple things I can do here. I can say prepare. If I do prepare, basically any pre-flushed materials would be consumed at that point. I don't have to do that, but some of my customers, actually the electric motor manufacturer, they'll have a material handler or water spider will go look at the board for the particular cells that he's responsible for. He'll see whether or not the materials are available. If they're available for the things that are scheduled that day, he'll go and pick them and prepare it, which will consume those materials. And then once he does that, it moves it to a status up on this board called prepared, so that the manufacturing folks, when they look at the board, they only see job statuses that are prepared and beyond, and so they'll know, oh, well, that's one that's available for me to work on. So they can filter their board based on this job status. I won't go into the details of that today, but if we have a detailed demo, I will in the future if you need to see that. So I'm the worker on the floor. I'm building this thing. I could start it if I wanted to track my start time, or I can just simply complete it and say it's done. So when I completed that, it drops off my board. It says it's done, and now it's basically available for the next work cell to do their task. And in this case, I think the next work cell in this particular Kanban is called machine. So machining now sees that they need to do something. There's no picking materials there because they were already consumed in the first activity. So they can start it or complete it, and then that fixed Kanban is basically completed. Now, if someone scanned the Kanban empty, they would do that from one of those boards as well. They would just simply have a scanner scan the barcode, and it would actually empty the Kanban and start that process all over again. So that pretty much handles the fixed Kanban process. And we talked a little bit about level loading when we were on the schedule board, and we talked about how we can drag the Kanbans up to the day that we want to run them, or the system can automatically schedule them and it'll drop them in when it needs them. So either methodology will work, and there's various reasons for using different techniques there. But this Kanban schedule board does a really nice job of graphically showing where you are, and if you do have a cell constrained, it won't let you schedule more than supposed to be done that day when it's automatically planned. If it's manually planned, you could overschedule. It would allow you to overschedule. The Kanban board for process jobs, as we mentioned a minute ago, that is the board that the production folks on the floor use to see what they need to make. They report that they picked material. They can report that they started it. They can report that they completed it. And then it'll drop off their board as it's completed. They also can see the picking list to see if the material availability is there, and you'll see that a little more in this next example. So my next example is the make-to-order process. So basically what happens here is we enter a sales event, we enter a sales order, which triggers the sales event. It creates a Kanban that tells us to make something. And that's a setup that we create with what's called a Kanban rule. So I'll show you the Kanban rule in a minute, but basically, if we say this Kanban rule is set up for sales events, when you enter a sales order, it'll trigger it, or if you run a batch process to trigger it, we can do that as well. So the sales event is going to create basically a pull to the floor telling them to make something. We'll have the ability to view the Kanbans on a pegging tree, and that's really a nice feature because from the sales order itself, your customer service people will be able to see, hey, these are the Kanbans for this particular sales order line. They'll actually be able to see the status of them as well. So we'll show you that in a minute. We'll transfer the material to line side for the pull to order material that we need to pull. We'll prepare and or start the Kanban. Again, this is very similar to the same methodology for the fixed Kanban. It's using the same schedule board. It's using the same process board. We'll prepare and start the Kanban, which will pre-flush or back-flush materials, whichever the case is. And then we'll produce the Kanban on the Kanban board, and that's actually when it back-flushes the material, and then we'll be able to ship it. And as you see here, these are a couple graphics at the bottom from some of our customers that use this methodology. So the one on the left is an advanced armor manufacturer, and they'll use sales events for their make-to-order parts. And then the electronic motor manufacturer uses it almost exclusively for their make-to-order parts. They have a couple of parts that are common, but most of their parts that they make are truly make-to-order. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and enter a sales order in AX and kind of start this process for the make-to-order Kanban, kind of to get you back in the thing here. So the scenario is I'm making this part to order, and the thing that's going to trigger it is the sales order itself. So I'm going to enter a new sales order in AX. Just choose this customer. And I'm going to choose my make to order finished good. It goes ahead and pulls in a quantity, and it pulls in the unit price. And then the thing that you're going to see immediately that it's going to do is it's actually going to create the Kanbans needed to make this and pull the parts. And this is what I call the pegging tree. This is a really nice feature. So from the sales order line, you can see the Kanban that was created for the top level item. And this particular Kanban only has one activity. It says to make it. It says final assembly. Nothing's been reported yet. And then the make-to-order component, it has a Kanban that was created for it as well. It's going through work cell D component assembly, and we haven't reported anything on that yet either. Another thing that will happen is once they're completed, they'll get a check mark on each one of the Kanbans. And then this lower level pull to order raw material, this is a transferred material that's specifically pulled just for this particular order or this case. You'd only use this typically in places where you need a signal to tell a material handler or water spider, hey, there's a specific material you need to pull for this order. In some cases it may be more than one item, but it generally would be a handful of items that you would create that signal for. Special pulled items that are not stored line side. And then this other item, this is an issue for the fixed Kanban component. Well, we should have that in inventory, so it didn't need to create a Kanban for that, because that is a fixed Kanban controlled item that's sitting in inventory and should be available. We'll be able to double check that and see that it is available here in a minute. Okay, so that's what we call the pegging tree. Okay, so now what we're going to do is I'm going to go to the process board and I'm going to show you if I'm in the final assembly area, this is what should be showing up on my board. So this is the make to order finished good with a quantity of 5. It's basically I entered a sales order and my people on the floor could immediately have visibility that they need to make something. So you can't get much leaner than that. You can look at your picking list. So I'm the production person out on the floor. I can look at my picking list and I can see these are the 2 things that I need. One of them is a make-to-order component, and it shows an X on that item, showing that I don't have it available. Of course, the fixed Kanban component, we built some of those a few minutes ago, so we've got plenty of those. And from here, I can also see any Kanban-controlled components for this particular area, the make-to-order component, and I can see there's a Kanban open for that. And I also can see any transfers that are required for this area as well. So this is the final assembly area. This is what's used to make the top level item. I'm going to switch work cells to another work cell within my facility that makes the component. So we're going to go to component assembly, and on the component we're going to see that it's got a pull to order raw material that we don't have yet. So the reason we don't have it is because it hadn't been transferred to the local area yet. So if I am the material handler, water spider, whatever you'd like to call that person, I could pull up the transfer board, and basically what this would show that water spider material handler, he's got this particular material, this pull to order material that he needs to pull from warehouse location to warehouse location line side. These locations obviously would fit whatever is in your facility. He could also look at the picking list to see that the system says that he has that inventory within location 01. He can start this, which would change the status, or he can simply complete it. And by completing it, he actually moved that material to the line side. So now I'm back to the process board. I'm the worker in work cell component assembly. I am now able to see that that material is now available. A minute ago it had a big red X there. When the water spider transferred the material, it now shows available on my process board. So I can go manufacture that particular make-to-order component by simply hitting complete, and it produces it, it consumed the materials, and it's now available for the next level up. I'm going to now change my work cell to the final assembly work cell. So now I'm the guy in final assembly, and look, now you see that both materials are available, so I can go ahead and build this top level assembly. Again, if I needed some production instructions that could have pulled over, if I needed to see some specific information, a drawing or notes or whatever on this particular part. So now I complete it, and now that item is actually ready to be shipped. So a key thing, kind of to go back over and summarize what we've been through here. The customer is able to manage make to order and make to stock or Kanban controlled items using the same boards, using the same schedule board, the same process board, the same transfers. It's a nice consistent interface. And one of the things we kind of talked about the transfer board, and you'll see here I've got 3 different graphics, 3 different customers that we're working with. 2 of them, 2 of the ones that I've worked with that are live actually use the transfer board, and then one of the customers I'm working with, a new customer, is going to use the transfer board as well. The electronic motor manufacturer uses the transfer board to pull materials when needed for prototyping and for repairs. And they actually have that a production order. They're using production orders for prototypes and repairs. It just gives them some different flexibility. And they use transfer Kanbans to tell them to pull the part.
Hey, John.
Yes.
Let me just interrupt there just for a moment. If you know, again, you know, we have over 30 people in the session right now, so we can't really open it up for questions. It just kind of gets too noisy when we do that. So keep in mind that if you do have a question, shoot it through to me in email. That's mhull, H-U-L-L, at eBECS, E-B-E-C-S.com. You can see the spelling of the company at the bottom there. And I'll interrupt John and, you know, insert your question someplace. So, John, back to you.
Okay, great. So basically, again, what we're talking about here when we're talking about transfers is we're talking about this transfer board. And so the transfer board is giving people the ability to trigger that they need to transfer material from one place to another. And we use this to transfer materials, our pull to order material a minute ago. So this would show the water spider material handler, hey, this is material that needs to be moved from one place to another. And this could be triggered a variety of different ways. It could be triggered with a fixed Kanban, a scheduled Kanban, or a Kanban line event. So there's a lot of ways this tool can really help your company. And the lightweight armor manufacturer uses it to actually transfer materials out to a subcontractor. So they have a logical warehouse in their system where they transfer materials to a subcontractor so they can track where the materials are that's being subcontracted. The tent manufacturer, as we mentioned earlier, plans to use the transfer methodology to replenish supermarkets for their runners and repeaters. And, of course, as we mentioned earlier, they're utilizing the fixed Kanban strategy for that. So basically, just in summary, we actually went through the make-to-order process. We entered a sales order with the sales event. We viewed the Kanbans on the pegging tree so we could kind of see what the status of them were. We used the transfer board to transfer material to the line side. Then the worker went to the process board and prepared or started the Kanbans, which could have pre-flushed material. We used the process board, checked it off as complete. It consumed the raw materials that were needed that were to be backflushed. And then we've put the thing in inventory to ship. So we really streamlined that process. Entered a sales order, triggered us to do these things, and click with a couple of clicks, we were able to produce product and ship it to the customer. The next thing I want to talk about is the underlying technology behind this. Microsoft really started from scratch. They don't use traditional routes. They use what's called production flows and activities in AX 2012, and it replaces the traditional routing. So the beauty of it is you don't have to maintain a separate route per item. You use things called ratios that will allow you to say, hey, this is a part that goes through the same process another part goes through. This part's a little bit harder in this work cell than another one, so it may have a ratio that's a little higher than another part because it's more complex. So that ratio is used for costing and capacity consumption, and an example of that would be maybe the average part is a ratio of 1. A part that's twice as hard would have a ratio of 2. And so you set these ratios on the part or even a group level for items so that they'll cost appropriately, and so they'll consume capacity appropriately. You can
Hey,
add
John?
yes.
Can I stop you there just for a moment? I've got a question here from Andrew, and he was interested in finding out how are lots controlled or serialized components allocated to a production Kanban?
Basically, anytime you're using lot control, if you're talking about the consumption of a lot controlled item, you're going to have to pick which lot you chose. And when you go to pick the material, you go into picking. You click a button and you basically pick which. We call it batch tracking in an AX. It's lot tracking. It's the same difference. But you have to pick that batch. If you try to post the process that we just did without picking your batch number of that material, it'll give you an error and tell you that you need to pick the batch. So basically, you just click a button, you pick the registration, you tell it which batch to use, say go, and then it'll consume that particular batch/lot. So
Okay,
hopefully
great.
that answers
He had two other questions, and feel free to to just answer these later on if they don't fit right here. But this one's very similar to the first. How are finished goods serial numbers generated and processed? And then the second question is, how are subassembly or finished goods labels and certificates managed and printed?
Well, the serial tracking, lot tracking, batch tracking, all of those types of things can be set up a variety of different ways. That's pretty much standard AX. It would work the same way as it would for production orders or lean. But basically, that's the system will automatically generate a serial number or batch number in the format that you desire, if that's the way you want to do it. Or you can set it up to where you would have to manually create the batch or serial number if it was something the system, it wasn't sequential or wasn't some way to calculate what it is. We've done that a variety of ways for our customers. One of them uses a date code as their batch number, and we make it where the system automatically generates that. So that's using AX number sequences, and it can do a lot of different flexibility there. On labeling, when you print a Kanban, you can print a Kanban ticket. If it's a sales event Kanban, it'll print the sales order number right on the ticket. I didn't show that today, but I can show you that in a follow-up if you would like to see that.
Okay, great. Thanks, John.
Okay. So again, if there's any other questions that I don't get to, feel free to forward them to Mike, and then I'll be glad to follow up with you at any point in time. No problem. Okay, so back to this idea of replacing a route. That's a pretty big task to replace a route, still be able to capacity plan and be able to see what steps you need to do to make something. So it's a pretty different concept for most people. So these are the forms that we use in AX to create the production flow and the activities. In this particular case, you just see the activities there are cut, machine, plate, and so forth. When I create the Kanban rule, and we'll kind of flip out there real quick and show you how that works. Within Lean, everything is driven based on a Kanban rule, and basically the rule has an activity that's tied to it, and then that activity is set up basically within the production flow. The activities that you need are kind of like routing steps, and when you create this Kanban rule, you actually pick which ones of these activities that apply to this particular Kanban rule. These Kanban rules can be created at the product level, specific product level, or they can be created at a family level, which actually the customers really like because they're able to write one Kanban rule that works for a whole class of products instead of having to write one of these for each part. So you get where the maintenance of that really is very minor. When you make a change to the production flow. You don't have to go change routes on 50 different items. You just go change the production flow and the activities in one place. Those ratios kind of take care of the differences between the parts, and it really simplifies that whole process. Okay, so the next thing we want to talk about a little bit, and we'll just briefly talk about this, the electronic motor manufacturer that we work with, they're using what's called CTP, and that's called capable to promise. When they confirm orders, they use this technique. It looks at the material availability and the capacity constraints to give them a due date that actually can be achieved. So in this particular manufacturer situation, they have a primary constraint in each one of their value streams. And as orders are loaded, the weekly throughput capacity of the cell is consumed using the complexity ratio that we talked about a minute ago of the particular part ordered, and a promise date is calculated based on that data. So the impact of this is that the end customer receives an achievable promise date. So basically we would look at, I can produce 100 of these parts a day through my cell. The CTP logic is going to say, well, do you have enough capacity in that 100, or is it already consumed? If it's consumed, then it has to go out to the next day. Is there some available there? And it goes on and on until it finds enough capacity to be able to meet the need of the order. And then it checks the material availability as well. If it has any items that aren't in stock, it looks at the purchase lead time of the components and calculates basically when I can deliver this item. So really, it's a great tool within AX. The last tool that I want to talk about is the Kanban calculation. We touched on this earlier, but this gives you the ability to look at historical usage of materials and see what your Kanban size ought to be. And actually what it does is it actually creates basically a suggested quantity for that. And I'll show you a little bit of the setup for that. I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail of it today, but again, if it's something that you want to see more, I'll be glad to take some time to show you. So the Kanban quantity calculation basically goes through, I've created one called runner parts calculation. So it can look at demand period start date or demand period end date. And if I'm wanting to look at basically MRP generated forecasted data, I could look in the future. If I wanted to look at historical usage, if I felt the historical usage would be a good indicator of what my Kanban size ought to be, then I could look at this fulfilled demand start and end dates. So I could actually do both, but generally I would either look behind and see what I've used in the past to calculate what it's going to be, or I'll look at the future date. And it also has some ability to look at some seasonal usage from years past as well if you needed to use last year's seasonal data to predict what the calculation should be for this year. So really, it's a very nice tool. It's looking at the data in the ERP and being able to calculate your number of Kanbans that you need automatically. You push a button and it updates the Kanban quantities for you and tells you to build more or less or whatever the case may be. So basically that covers everything that I was planning to show today, and I'm sure in each one of your individual companies you may have different needs than others, and we would be more than happy to show you different functionality of the system that might fit your individual needs at some point in the future. Mike, it's all yours.
John, thanks very much. John, could you go to the very last slide down there? Okay, so like we mentioned to begin with, first of all, thanks very much everybody for your attention and for your interest. And we will follow up with each of you probably over next week. And basically the idea would be that we just want to touch base to see if this is something of interest to you. If it was, the next step would be to have a conference call discovery with your lean team, and we'd have somebody like John on the phone, and basically you would walk us through what you've done and what kind of processes you have in place. We'd have a back and forth discussion on that to determine which of those you'd like to see in the software, and then we'd agree on what a demonstration might consist of, and then at a date we'd agree on, we'd come back and we'd do a remote demo of those kinds of items. So probably figure about 60 minutes for the conference call discovery, and probably 60 plus a bit minus a bit, depending on how much we need to show in the one-to-one demo. But that would be our next step, and we will follow up on that with you. So again, thanks very much for your attention this afternoon. And as John mentioned, if you do have any questions, you hang up and you remember something, please send it through to me, and we will get back with John or somebody who can answer your question. So you've got my contact information down there at the bottom. I'm here in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and be happy to talk with you soon. So thanks very much, everybody. Have a great afternoon and a great evening. Take care.